Today, we will discuss a topic that can be a little difficult to grasp, a rather profound topic in Buddhism. Understanding the self, the ego, the I. This topic is a bit difficult. We often hear that in Buddhism there is a teaching called non-self, correct? Non-self means there is no I. So today we will talk about what this non-self, this I, truly is. To begin, if we want to understand what it means to have no I, we must first understand what the I actually is. Right now, we often speak to one another, addressing each other with, "I'll tell you this, and you told me that." So, there is something we call the I. Or we say, "I just met someone," or "Tomorrow, I will go somewhere." The I is always present within us. In this life, all of us perceive an I that acts as the center of our existence. There is such an I. If we reflect on this deeply, we will find ourselves quite surprised. Why does this I exist? I can share with you that when I was a child, very young, around 6 or 7 years old, I had this feeling, why do I have an I? Why does this I constantly think? And why is my I not located in other people? Is another person's I the same as mine? I kept wrestling with these questions from a young age. It wasn't until I grew up and encountered the Dharma that it finally dawned on me. This is the essential point in the practice that the Buddha taught, causing us to sink into the endless cycle of rebirth and suffering. Therefore, if there is a path that helps us transcend this self, this I, so that the I, the self, no longer exists, then we can truly escape all suffering. One can transform from an ordinary person into a noble, enlightened being. What is an ordinary person and what is a noble one? The only difference lies in having an I or not having an I. That is all. So, when we speak of this I, we are speaking of the most essential point of Buddhism. As disciples of the Buddha, today we are listening to the most essential point of Buddhism. If until now we have heard many teachings but have never heard about the self, have never heard about non-self, then we have not yet entered the innermost core of the Buddha's message. So today, by a fortunate condition and with the protection of the three jewels, we are about to hear the most essential teaching of Buddhism. Therefore, I ask all of you to quiet your minds in purity and listen carefully, because if anyone can hear this, absorb it deeply, and understand it, you will have attained a truly great merit. You will have sown a genuine seed of enlightenment in your heart, one that will allow you to travel very far on the path of cultivation. The venerable monks and nuns here already understand this deeply, so they sit simply to bear witness. For the lay Buddhists listening, this is very difficult, so please try your best. Please try very hard. This is a very difficult topic. What is the I? We know there is an I, don't we? We always say, I do this, I do that, so we know there is an I. But what is the I? It depends on the circumstances and the spiritual level of each person. The more of a worldly person one is, the larger their I becomes, the further it extends. In contrast, the more of a noble one a person is, the more wisdom they possess, and the more their I shrinks, becoming more and more subtle. And for those with the highest spiritual attainments, the self is extremely subtle. For example, unless one has attained the level of an arhat, a great bodhisattva, or a fully enlightened Buddha, everyone still has a self. Whether large or small, a subtle self remains. As for ordinary people who are fierce and greedy, their self is very easy to see. Let me give you a small example of what the self is. Imagine two neighbors, each with a garden. One man is in his garden, planting flowers and vegetables. Suddenly, his neighbor's dog runs into his yard and produces a little product, leaving it right on his flower bed. Seeing the neighbor's dog do this, the man becomes furious. He yells, "You insulted me! You insulted me! Letting your dog come into my garden, and do that means you insulted me." So, for this man, what does he perceive the self to be? What is the I? The I has become synonymous with his flower garden, hasn't it? The dog relieved itself in the garden, and he says it insulted him. Therefore, he is the flower garden, isn't that right? You see, the self has spilled over into the garden. listening to this man's complaints, takes a can of paint and splashes it all over their door. The next morning, the homeowner opens the door to find the front of their house defaced with vulgar words and black paint. They erupt in anger, shouting, "You people are despicable. You look down on me. You insult me." So, for this person, the house is the I. Defacing the house is considered a personal insult. Here, you have no idea why they are angry. They just take the photo you gave them and tear it. Instantly, you feel anger. Your pride flares up, and you say, "How dare you disrespect me? Why would you tear me up like that?" So what does this person understand the I to be? It is the photograph, right? They believe the I is the photograph, so when the photo is touched, they feel they have been touched. Their mind is instantly disturbed, and their pride immediately ignites. Or, in the middle of a conversation, one person grabs another's shirt. The person whose shirt is grabbed becomes enraged. They say, "In front of everyone, he dared to grab my shirt. He insulted me." For this person, the shirt is I. And so, the concept of the I gets smaller and smaller. Or, imagine you are walking down the street, and someone throws a bucket of water from their house, accidentally splashing you. You get annoyed. You get angry. You say, "Why did you splash? Splash me like that?" What does this person understand the I to be? The I is the body, right? This physical form. And here, we have almost reached the core. Touching the body is truly getting to the real I. While the garden, the picture, and the house are also the I, that I is distant. Because we have touched this physical body and its sensations, we begin to feel that this I is real. Or consider this. In a crowded meeting, the community is discussing how to improve the village. Livelihoods have gotten better, more people have cars, and tourists visit because of a local cultural site. But the road is too narrow. The community agrees to contribute time and money to widen it. People offer different ideas. Then you stand up and offer your opinion. The moment you finish, a man declares, "That idea is worthless," and you still had the nerve to say it. At that moment, how do you feel? How do you feel? Your pride boils over. You feel your pride surging, and because your opinion was refuted, you feel hurt and think, "That person insulted me." So, for this person, what is the I? It is the opinion, right? My opinion is me. Therefore, anyone who refutes my opinion is insulting me. So, I am my opinion. This is where the self begins to get deeper, much deeper. Or consider this. A person practices meditation until their mind becomes completely empty, pure, and thought-free. Their mind is perpetually luminous, and they realize, this pure, empty, radiant mind. This is the real me. This is truly the I. So this person considers the I to be the empty mind. That is still an I. So far, these examples have been to help us understand what the I is. It varies depending on one's circumstances, spiritual maturity, and wisdom. For the worldly person, the I is located very far away. Touch their house, their car, their yard, and they feel personally insulted. For a more refined person, the self gradually retracts until only their opinions matter. External things are unimportant, but if their opinion is challenged, their pride is wounded. For example, if a chicken wanders into their yard and starts scratching, they might laugh and say, "It's just a chicken scratching the yard. It hasn't touched me." This means they no longer see the yard as their self, so their mind is unmoved. But if someone calls out their name and curses them, their mind is immediately disturbed, because they see the name as I. The name is I. As for the person whose mind is pure, like the noble ones, you can call them by name and scold them, but they remain perfectly calm, serene, and unangered. This is because they no longer see that name as I. For most of us, the most basic things will trigger an immediate affliction. Touch our body. If someone slaps our face, what happens? We get angry instantly, because this face is I. Or if someone calls out our name to criticize or to praise us, our mind is moved at once. If we are praised, we are happy. If we are criticized, we are angry. Therefore, this name is the I. In this case, their opinion, their viewpoint, their thoughts are their I, correct? This is a slightly deeper I. So, considering the levels we've discussed, each of us should reflect. Who are we? Where is the line where we begin to feel anger? Does it start when someone touches our yard? If so, our I is as big as the yard. If we aren't angered by that and commit innumerable mistakes. This is especially true in the modern era, with its bizarre culture that encourages people to protect their individuality. Remember, the culture of our ancestors was one of non-self. In a community, no one dared to dress differently from others. You wore what everyone else wore or you would be admonished. Everyone blended into the collective life. But today, the trend is to wear something that no one else has, to be unique, to be different. This is a lifestyle that inflates the self, and that is a very dangerous thing. When the self develops, greed, anger, and ignorance develop with it. They call it respecting individuality. But in reality, this drive to be different is just another way of developing the self. And the more the self develops, the more depressed and miserable people become. This is true for children as well. For thousands of years, our East Asian culture has focused on teaching children to obey their elders, to train them in non-self from the very beginning. The capacity to endure great hardship. In contrast, many Western cultures today indulge children, causing their ego to develop from an early age. If their parents scold them, they feel offended and immediately pick up the phone to call the authorities, asking for intervention so their parents cannot discipline them. When the self grows so large, the capacity to endure hardship diminishes. As adults, they struggle to face life's difficulties. This is why, after Vietnam's glorious victories over foreign powers, the world was astonished. They came to Vietnam and saw a small, poor, underdeveloped country. Yet it won every war it fought. They couldn't understand it. They sent people to investigate, to discover the source of Vietnam's resilience. They searched and searched, but to this day, they still don't understand how Vietnam defeated one colonial and imperial power after another. If they were here today, they would understand. They would understand that Vietnam's resilience comes from its culture of non-self. It is a culture where we live in our villages and communities, blending in with everyone, not daring to be different or stand out. It is a culture where children are taught from a young age to obey their elders, to endure hardship without resentment, and to love and respect their parents. Having been taught the culture of non-self, they grow up to win every battle. It is our culture of non-self that gives us this strength. So, this path to enlightenment in Buddhism is also, in reality, what creates the resilience of a nation. It is a path of not seeing oneself as important, of blending into the community and respecting others. The current lifestyle is a threat to our youth, and therefore a threat to our entire nation. It is the lifestyle that promotes the self, that develops individuality. Just the other day in Hanoi, I saw a billboard with a slogan for some brand that read, "I am different because I am me." One short sentence with the word I 3 times. This is a culture that encourages the development of the self. As long as slogans like that are on display, they are slowly killing the resilience of our people. The person who authorized that billboard did not understand the danger. A culture that promotes individuality and the self is a culture that poisons our nation. Don't believe that a person with a large ego is a resilient person. No, a person with a large ego is, in fact, a very weak person. When trouble strikes, they fall into depression and suffering. I don't know why Americans get depressed so easily. Over small things that I consider normal, they suffer immensely. I explained that this is due to the Western culture of the self. Young people are indulged, their egos nurtured from childhood. Therefore, the larger the self, the less resilience one has in life. Our Eastern culture, in contrast, is a culture of diminishing the self. That is why we can grow up to face any challenge life throws at us. When we consider our I to be important, we develop pride, self-satisfaction, self-aggrandizement, self-esteem. All of these selves arise from the ego. Other religions also recognize the danger of the self and have sought to sublimate it, to transform the crude, vulgar ego into something higher. Some religions have elevated the self into concepts like the true self, the divine self, the spiritual self, or the great self. The cycle of birth and death. Therefore, one must be completely liberated from the I, from any and every kind of I. The practice must be aimed at attaining complete non-self. To no longer be entangled in any concept of a self, whether it be a true self, a divine self, or a great self. All forms of the self must be brought to an end. There must be complete non-self. This is the essential point of Buddhism. Therefore, if someone asks you, what is the essence of Buddhism? What distinguishes it from other religions? What is its highest teaching? And the wisdom of Buddhism is to see clearly that the nature of the self is, in fact, nothing at all. That is the core of the Buddha's teaching, and that is what we are hearing today. Because of this we have committed countless sins. First, because of this we crave indulgence. We like to eat well, dress beautifully, and enjoy worldly pleasures. When these pleasures reach their extreme, they lead to things like drug addiction. People become so dependent on the intense pleasure that they lose all integrity, willing even to harm their own parents for money to fuel their addiction. A small indulgence creates a little greed and selfishness. A greater indulgence creates greater greed and greater sin. It is also because of this that we become angry. At first, it's just a flicker of anger when someone insults us or takes something from us. But when pushed, it escalates into hatred and cruelty. When it reaches the peak of hatred and cruelty, causes us to create immense negative karma. And for every sin, there is a karmic price to pay. The punishment of worldly law is often light compared to the law of cause and effect. Killing a person doesn't just end one life. It can destroy a family and send negative ripples throughout society for generations. That is why, even after serving a worldly sentence, the karmic debt remains, leading to suffering in hell and difficult rebirths. And what is the source of this anger and cruelty? It is only because there is an I. Only because of the I. We become stingy and miserly, indifferent to the suffering of those around us. We only know our own world. In this life, we are not allowed to only know ourselves. To know of another's suffering and pretend not to see it is a sin that leads to the future karmic result of being deaf and blind. Therefore, when you see something that needs to be done, please do it. When you hear of someone in need, please help. Do not turn away. This compassion stems from overcoming the selfishness that arises from the I. From this I, we create endless mistakes and suffer painful consequences. The one who can practice non-self, however, creates limitless merit and avoids countless errors. This is the character of a noble being. Therefore, Buddhism must clearly affirm that the goal of practice is to attain non-self. No more I. Remember that. Whenever you kneel to prostrate before the Buddha, remember this one thing. To follow the Buddha is to seek the path of non-self. All practice is truly aimed at this goal. And non-self has two aspects. One is non-self in our moral conduct with others. The first aspect of non-self is our moral conduct with others in the world. The second is the method of spiritual cultivation within ourselves. First, let's discuss non-self in our moral conduct. You might notice your father coming home from work with a troubled expression and realize he must have had a difficult day. Instead of being indifferent and only thinking about yourself, you can bring him some water and a towel and wait for him to feel calmer before sharing your own news. This attentiveness gradually extends to your neighbors and your community. You practice living for others, loving others, in every thought and every action. That is the first non-self morality. The second non-self morality is humility. Humility means seeing yourself as ordinary and small, which allows you to respect everyone. When the ego is large, we rarely respect others. We always see ourselves as better and are quick to criticize. But when the I shrinks, we begin to see the good in other people. We constantly look for the good in them to praise. So, look at yourself. In your life, have you praised more or criticized more? If you criticize more, you know your ego is still large. If you praise more, you know your ego has shrunk, and you possess a bit of the virtue of non-self. Another non-self morality is absolute reverence for the Buddha. If we do not have absolute reverence, an unshakable reverence will arise. You will vow to offer your entire body and mind to the Buddha. This reverence extends to all the great bodhisattvas and sages. We must also know how to pray for their spiritual support. But is this prayer superstition? A prayer is superstitious if you ask for a worldly reward, like winning the lottery. A fearful person, one who is afraid of everything, has a very large ego. But a person who no longer sees the I as real dares to walk into danger and even death without fear. And what is the most important courage? The courage to admit your own mistakes. A person with a large ego avoids difficulty and evades blame. This country has survived for thousands of years because of heroes who were willing to die to protect it. A person who no longer fears death possesses a great merit. These non-self moralities are the virtues our ancestors have praised for generations. And another non-self morality is sympathetic joy. This means rejoicing in the happiness of others. And this creates a heavy negative karma that will prevent you from ever developing talent yourself. But if you rejoice in the talent of another, you will become talented in future lives. We acknowledge their error, but we also consider their good qualities and find a way to help them move forward. Our hearts are free from grudges. This is only possible when our I is small. So far, we have spoken of non-self morality in our conduct. Now, let's speak of non-self in spiritual practice. The level of attainment in Buddhism is directly related to the degree of non-self. The more non-self a person has realized, the higher their level of sainthood. The more ego a person has, the more of a worldly person they remain. This is how you can assess a practitioner's attainment. Therefore, the core method of all Buddhist practice is to eliminate the self. This is what distinguishes it from mistaken paths that promise indulgence for the ego. Some religions promise that if you follow them, you will attain all sorts of pleasures, even pleasures in the afterlife that are just like worldly ones. This is merely the indulgence of a vulgar, ordinary ego. There is nothing noble about it. In Buddhism, the promise is non-self. The two are completely different. This is how you can distinguish the right path from the wrong path. If a path promises you future indulgence, you know it is a wrong path. If a path promises you the realization of non-self, where there is no I left to indulge, you know it is the right path. Even in the Gospel of Christ, it is said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves." To deny oneself is non-self. To follow the path of the saints, one must become non-self. The first contemplation is that this body is impermanent. One day it will die, and death is not the end. It will continue to decay and decompose until even the bones turn to dust. We must contemplate the impermanence of the body deeply. This is the first step in the spiritual practice of non-self. When you contemplate this continuously for 6 months or a year, a new wisdom will arise. You will have a breakthrough and realize that wealth, status, and fame are fleeting. They are not for personal enjoyment, but are responsibilities, tools to be used to do good in the world. A person who realizes this lives with great compassion, a wisdom born from simply sitting in motionless meditation, always aware that this body is impermanent. Next, you see that all feelings, sadness, joy, pleasure, pain, are also illusory. You begin to realize how you have been dominated by the feelings that arise in the body. The pleasure of tasty food, the discomfort of heat, the joy of praise. All these feelings of fear, worry, sadness, and happiness have controlled your life, dictating your actions. But now you see that this body is already impermanent. Therefore, the feelings within it are also illusory and fleeting. You see them clearly, and they no longer have the power to command you to do foolish things. Reaching this stage means your practice is quite advanced. You have gained control over your mind, your life, and your emotions. This is the result of sitting in serious meditation for 5 or 10 years. For so long, we have thought, I think this, I believe that. But when you enter deep meditation, you discover something astonishing. It turns out, it's not me. These thoughts that arise and cease are not me. A person who sees to this level has entered the ranks of the saints, gradually freeing themselves from the attachment to the self of thoughts. Even when a practitioner's mind enters a state of unwavering concentration, completely empty and motionless, let me tell you, the ego is still hiding in there. It is not over. To think you have attained enlightenment at this stage is to risk immediate regression, or even madness. This is why you must have a teacher. When you attain concentration, you present your experience to your teacher. Your teacher will say, "You are not there yet. The ego is still lurking. Be careful or it will strike you down." Warned, the disciple does not cling to the state of concentration and continues to practice with humility. Only then can they truly attain enlightenment and escape the self. It is not easy. The self is very, very difficult to overcome. Therefore, any Buddhist practice method must have the goal of non-self at its core. If you practice meditation without focusing on non-self, you are going astray. If you recite the Buddha's name without focusing on non-self, you can easily fall into wrong paths. Whatever the practice, the goal of non-self must be affirmed in both life and spiritual cultivation. Remember this, and so, from now on, whenever you go to the temple to chant, we will recite the non-self verse first. The ego, a fleeting wisp of smoke and dew, body and mind, but dust along the road. With a single heart, I follow the Buddha, seeking non-self. To find the cosmos is just a boundless love. The last line is beautiful and profound. The cosmos refers to this entire vast universe. On the day you realize non-self, when you are no longer you, do not think that everything ceases to exist. No. It is at that moment you understand that the entire universe is a single fabric of love, shared among all sentient beings. It no longer belongs to any separate individual. At that point, to attain the happiness of the Buddha's land, you must strive. The fair price for that attainment is precisely non-self. So when you recite Namo Amitabha Buddha, remember also, this body is impermanent, like dust. This mind is non-self, temporary. There is no I. When you recite and contemplate non-self in this way, you are truly seen and loved by the Buddha. The bodhisattvas immediately shine their light to protect such a person. The one who is protected by divine beings is the one who practices non-self. When you are near such a person, you feel happy. After meeting them, you go home and encounter good fortune. That is how you know they are protected. A temple is sacred if the monks and nuns who reside there practice non-self. Their virtue attracts the protection of Buddhas and celestial beings, and all who visit benefit from that sacred energy. It is the same for a mantra chanter or a meditator. The one who contemplates non-self while practicing finds their practice becomes powerful and they are protected. The one who becomes arrogant in their attainment will eventually go astray. Non-self is the core. Therefore, from now on, when you seek a teacher, ask them this one question: Venerable One, do you teach the practice of non-self here? If they say yes, you can follow them with confidence, for you are on the right path of Buddhism. If they look at you blankly and ask, "What is non-self?" then please turn around and walk away, because non-self is the very core of Buddhism. Now you have grasped the core of the practice. But to realize it, you may need 5 years, 10 years, 5 more lifetimes, 10 more lifetimes. There is no easy way. You must remember the journey is long. And when I say a few hundred years, I'm already being optimistic. In the sutras, the Buddha spoke of a monk who attained enlightenment. But even in that, I'm stretching the truth a bit. The path of non-self is very long. But today, you have heard about non-self, you have understood non-self, and you have felt a yearning for this path. That means a seed of enlightenment has been sown in your heart. It is a burning seed that will begin to grow from this day forward, and been deeply moved by it. Our self is not real. It changes, transitioning through many lifetimes. A person who was once a great general, whose name is now on a street sign, could be reborn today and walk down that very street without feeling any connection. The self of that life and the self of this life have been disconnected, and so we forget. We don't remember that we are that general. The praise for that historical figure feels distant, because the self has already transitioned and changed over many lifetimes. That is why the Buddha said the self is not real. It is not permanent or eternal, as some other religions have mistakenly believed. It changes, it transforms, and when we attain enlightenment through our practice, it disappears completely. We are honored to be here today, on behalf of the Venerable Sangha, to share the Dharma with all of you. The venerable monks and nuns have joyfully sat with us, lending their spiritual support to make this Dharma talk complete. I wish to express my deep gratitude for their merit and pray that the three jewels bless them with great fortune, that their work for the Dharma may always be successful, and that we, the lay followers, may always have them to take refuge in. I wish all of you that your devotion may grow stronger each day, that your work and family life may be filled with luck and thuan loy, that your Dharma brothers and sisters may always love one another, and that your practice may be ever diligent and unceasing. May all sentient beings achieve the path of the Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.